Liberty. I was born a Leo in San Francisco the summer of 1970. And yes, my parents were hippies who dropped way too much acid before naming their children. My dad Art and his brother Jim comprise one of 20th century San Francisco's most infamous duos, the Mitchell brothers. Reared by enchanting Okie grifters in the dusty Delta town of Antioch, they would by happenstance emerge as pioneers of the pornography industry, unveiling Ivory Snow Girl Marilyn Chambers in their 1972 Rated X feature, Behind the Green Door. They rode a rags to riches wave from the Cannes Film Festival to becoming millionaires. Much of the riches were plowed into First Amendment court battles over the definition of obscenity, which they beat every time. The rest went into Mercedes, marijuana, and cocaine to entertain the streams of celebrities, politicians, and underground artists who flocked to the Mitchell Brothers of Barrel Theater for lap dances, poker games, and hijinks. While it surely was all very cutting edge for the adults on the scene, growing up as the sensitive and dreamy oldest child, a girl no less, and our clandestine dynasty had its challenges. One of the prevailing ironies of my life is that though the Mitchell Brothers film group spawned from the free love era, neither of my parents ever talked to me about sex, let alone puberty. I was left, like many of the girls in my generation of the 70s, left with Judy Blume's classic, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, trying to decipher the difference between menstruation and masturbation. In fact, I knew, without knowing I knew, what sex entailed by age 3 or 4, when one afternoon I followed my dad into the screening room at the O'Farrell. My Uncle Jim and their cronies were reviewing the prior day's filming. Fancying myself as Bugs Bunny in his director mode, I sidled up into a chair next to my daddy, crossed my arms, and just like him, stared analytically at the projection on the wall. One of the guys whispered to my dad, "You sure she should be watching this?" He shrugged. "Nah, she don't know what she's looking at." But I got the picture mighty quick. It was a tight close-up of a penis and vagina thrusting away in full-on coitus. No audio, but it looked like it sounded squishy. I kept my cool, playing it off the whole time, just another day making movies. By the time I reached the mature age of 6, my parents had divorced. Stops by the theater during weekend visitation riddled me with anxiety. By then, the Mitchell brothers had passed their peak in making pornos, so instead of screening flicks, the club now featured real live girls. There was an unnameable oppression as I'd survey the photographic flock of spread eagles that line the hallway. And something about having a parade of G-strings swinging past my nose at 11 a.m. felt inherently wrong to me. Where was I supposed to look? Dad, I can read. The sign says under 18, not admitted. I don't want to go to jail. I was well aware that Dad's frequent business trips were often code for another raid at the O'Farrell, another night spent in the pokey for my dad and Uncle Jim. He'd chide me, "You wouldn't be a Mitchell if you didn't do a little jail time." I was hardly put at ease. The yin to the yang of my life was that before becoming a sexual revolutionary come hippie attorney, my mother had been a WASP Ivy Leaguer raised outside Boston, the daughter of a surgeon and a Mayflower descendant to boot. My younger siblings and I spent summers back east with our grandparents, steeped in tradition, table manners, and a love of the sea. We learned how to pass as normal and were given space far away from where anyone knew or cared about the Mitchell brothers. The Labor Day I turned 9, our cross-country trip home to San Francisco ended being dropped at the O'Farrell around 11 p.m. so my mother could get her car out of the parking lot. Surely this move tortured her, because it wasn't ever her way to bring us by the O. We 3 tired little towheads scurried by her side to the front door of the club, while a drunk on the sidewalk staggered toward us and slurred, "Your children are beautiful. Takes 2 to make them like that, don't it?" Mom humored him with a fake laugh. She left us in the lobby with Charlie, our dad's childhood friend who worked the door, so we felt safe as we could. Though there was that sign about being 18 again, and I just prayed there wasn't a raid that night. My little brother and sister were weaving from jet lag, still young enough to be oblivious about our impending incarceration. I held the thought when our grandparents had hugged us goodbye only hours before on the eastern seaboard. I closed my eyes and tied my heart around that moment. We'd still been far away from the lobby of the O'Farrell. When I finally hit puberty, my mother held fast to her inherent loss of identity and never did broach menstruation and certainly not masturbation with me. The closest she came was when I undeniably developed into the realm of an A cup verging on B. If I appeared in a top she didn't approve of, she'd give an icy stare, flatlining me with, "That blouse isn't very modest. I don't want you looking like one of the dancers at the O'Farrell." She needn't have worried. Taking to heart the lessons of my surrogate father, Pa Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie, I knew the goal was true love, chastity until marriage, and to never, ever be called a slut. While I retreated back east to a performing arts prep school in the mid-'80s, the Mitchell brothers were inspired by the AIDS crisis ravaging San Francisco to make the first safe-sex porno, Behind the Green Door 2. My dad's girlfriend, Missy Manners, was the lead. Her handle was the Republican porn star, highlighting her teen years as a Senate page to none other than Orrin Hatch. Thankfully, Missy talked frankly to me about the necessity of safe sex. Shoving condoms into my Fendi purse, she told me about all the cool gay guys she knew who were dropping like flies. But like, oh my God, Lib, some of those guys were totally bi. I mean, I think anyone can get this, don't you? Dad, for his part, held up his hands, conceding, "I couldn't believe it when my AIDS test came back negative. I thought I'd have it for sure." After graduating prep school, I returned to Southern California for college. My USC buddies thought it was awesome that my dad had a strip club, so field trips to the O'Farrell were had. I got to know some of the dancers for the first time. One of them actually was a classmate from prep school. Some, looking into the future, bemoaned that they'd be hard-pressed to ever find a job where they could make $800 a night. I naively encouraged them with a, "Sure you could." Not that I had any idea how. But I was more impacted at the time by those who took true pride in their performance, talking about their choreography as craft, painstakingly rehearsing routines with vibrators with solid gold finesse. I began to reconsider the fear and loathing I'd long harbored for the family biz. Maybe porn wasn't so bad after all. Maybe I was just a square who had watched too much Little House on the Prairie, and it was time to grow up. However, it only took my attendance at one O'Farrell Christmas party, watching seemingly sound men turn into werewolves once the sun went down, to convince me my gut had been right all along. The booze and buds charged the sexual atmosphere, stoking a dark entitlement in the men, where suddenly every female present was a target for a public fondling or a blowjob, whether she was a dancer, a journalist, or Art Mitchell's daughter. Why would I or any woman want to be a part of a world so grossly abusive if she had a choice? Why do decent men have a dormant dirtbag within them readily activated by earned sexuality? My dad shagging a porn star my same age didn't help my mounting cavalcade of sexual issues. Then, 2 months later, my father was murdered by his brother Jim. I was 20 years old and gobsmacked to find that having a murder in the family seemed a bigger stigma than pornography had ever been. For the next decade, recovery from that surreal trauma overwhelmed processing my issues with porn. All I knew is that I wanted to stay as far away from the O'Farrell and that business as possible. So I did. I got married, had kids, I did my best to give my family a normal life, but something remained unfinished. Seeing my kids grow up began to awake the deeper truths of childhood abuses I'd experienced by being exposed to pornography. During an online child abuse training I had to take for work as a part-time yoga instructor at the Y, I was validated to read for the first time what I always felt was true. Exposing children to pornography is a form of sexual abuse. It took my breath away to read that on the screen. As passive as my exposure was, no one was forcing it on me. It was simply there. It was inappropriate and unexplained. It was abuse. With this new understanding, I began to embrace myself as a survivor. I began to forgive my parents for unwittingly casting us into the counterculture fallout endemic of the 1970s parenting model. Despite everything, they loved us dearly. During this time, I was honored to work under former First Lady of California, Maria Shriver, on the Women's Conference. I was humbled by the hundreds of women who shared their tales of survival. Survivors of grief, addiction, cancer, rape, and sex trafficking. They made my life look pretty damn manageable in comparison. They underscored that it's a choice. To find acceptance and become a survivor, or to be defined by the horrors in one storyline. During my tenure at the Women's Conference, Gloria Steinem donated her Minerva Award Prize to Prostitution Research Education. When I first learned about PRE, I was initially interested in helping the fight against human trafficking and those seeking to escape prostitution. But I was stunned to find, when reading the research conducted by Dr. Melissa Farley, that would become instrumental in my coming to terms with my experience in pornography. As I developed a correspondence with Dr. Farley, it became clear that perhaps I could use perspective from my own story to help shed light on the insidious intricacies of the pornography, sex trafficking, prostitution triumvirate, which presently is often at best misrepresented and misunderstood by the general public. Pornography today is a different animal than what the Mitchell brothers made behind the green door. Internet access has created a new monster. Much of what is out there are not empowered porn stars on a film set, but women and children who have been trafficked into prostitution, their rapes filmed, and then shared in perpetuity online as sexual entertainment. This isn't just happening in Cambodia and Thailand. This is happening in Oakland, it's happening in Oklahoma. Sex trafficking is happening in every state in the US. The complex infrastructure of the domestic and international sex trafficking industry is only second to drugs and underground revenue. What can we do? There is no simple answer. Admitting we have a sexual sickness plaguing our nation and world is the first step. We must destroy the normalizing myth masterfully perpetuated by the sex industry that pornography is simply harmless fun. Prostitution is an empowered choice. And human trafficking is a bad thing that only happens to poor people far, far away. Lean in and join the community of daring abolitionists like PRE and Street's disciples to face this problem, as gut-wrenching as it is. You are aware now. Take that awareness with you so we can re-educate our next generation of boys on what true sexual intimacy is, so we may stem the global tide wave of sexual exploitation so damaging to us all. Thank you.